Hi everyone, we are going to go ahead and launch our book study, Reaching and Teaching Children Exposed to Trauma, but we're going to do it a little bit different. We're going to come to you and bring you just snippets of each chapter, so that's not kind of a big sit down and you can kind of do this at your own pace. So let's go ahead and get started. Very excited to bring you some of this content. We're going to start by looking at chapter 1. There we go. And it starts with just talking about what trauma is. There's two components for an event to be categorized as traumatic. And so trauma is defined by the individual's sensory system, not by the intensity of the event. And that's the key word is and, there's a long-term adverse effect of mentally, physically, socially, emotionally, and or spiritually that is happening to the person. So again, when we're talking about trauma, it's got to meet the threshold of both things, that it affects someone's individual's their sensory system, and that there's long-term adverse effects, either mentally, physically, socially, emotionally, or spiritually. Not all of those things, but it can be some of those. And another thing I kind of wanted to point out about trauma is that people can experience the same event, and one could have found it traumatic to them, to their body, to their sensory system, and someone else may not have found it to be that traumatic. It's why some people who grow up in the same households, you find a brother and a sister, and one turns out, leads their life this way, and another one leads their life a completely different way. And so that's why there's the two prong thresholds for exactly what trauma is. So when we're looking at trauma, most often we are looking at types of abuse. We're looking at physical abuse, we're looking at neglect, we're looking at sexual abuse, emotional abuse, domestic violence, and abandonment. In the U.S., more than 700,000 children are abused every year. It's an extremely sad statistic, but one that we're very well aware of, and guys being in the classroom are almost, along with our FRS and our site facilitators, are the first line of being in contact with some of these young abuse victims. So just a little bit of background. You can read a little bit more of that in the book if you'd like. One thing that we do like to point out is that neglect can be just as toxic as some traumas, and in some cases neglect and trauma co-occur, meaning they occur at the same time, but they just have very different biological effects on the brain and on developing systems of our little learners. So brain development. The book talks a little bit about brain development, and so the key points that I wanted to bring up here is that brain development does begin in the womb. So all things affect the child while they're in the womb, such as the mom being under stress. We know about drugs and alcohol, but also their diet. Anything that they eat affects the development of the child in the womb. So to be even more complex, if we look at the brain, and specifically during the 3rd week of development in the womb, the embryo forms the 3 main parts of the brain, and by that next week, by the 4th week, the brain actually begins functioning. And so while it's building itself around the 4th month and then onward, the brain starts making those neural pathways. It starts making all of those synapses and the connections to all parts of the body. And this is while they're still in the womb. And by the 8th month, the baby can recognize and remember its mother's voice, its father's voice, just, certain music, different things like that. And those of you that have carried a baby in the womb, then maybe you've experienced that when you played a certain song, maybe the baby danced along in the womb. So different things like that. But I think that the big thing to understand is that it's developed long before the baby is born, and all of those things, even while they're in the womb, affect it. The stress, the drugs, the alcohol, and the diet. And so we do work with our pregnant teen moms on trying to keep their stress down, making sure they're eating correct, and of course discouraging the use of substances. So growing humane beings, you are a brain architect. So I think it's very important for us to remember that how many neural connections are being built every second, and how important you are, and you are absolutely vital to that development. One thing that I think we don't think about is kind of like the core health of the child. And some of those things can include using like rhythm. When the baby's still in the womb, rhythm is critical. It regulates the heart rate. Anything like nature and music and dancing, it's essential to healing of the body. But that rhythm that they hear, rocking of babies, to help them find their own rhythm once they're born, helps them regulate. That's why sometimes when we're patting a preschooler on the back, we're trying to help them find their rhythm. The regulation brings wellness and balance, and it deactivates the stress hormone when you're bringing about that balance. So rhythm is very important. Always encouraging music and dancing in the classroom, because that is actually building their self-regulation tools. When you give an infant their rhythm that they experienced in the womb, it helps them regulate once they're born. Like if you rock a baby while you are feeding them or warming them, loving them, just those feelings strengthen that association between rhythm and their self-regulation. Sometimes that, along with the smell and touch and the sound of the voice, that is what creates those neural pathways of regulation. So sometimes when kids come to us, they haven't had that. And so those are some ways that we can help continue to develop their brain and those neural pathways, is to develop that rhythm with the student. And so that's why we talk about breathing so much, because you are breathing in rhythm with your preschooler, and that is helping them develop their self-regulation tools. Regulation creates those healthy neural pathways. But one of the keys to being able to do that is making sure as adults that we remain regulated ourselves, because when children are cared for by adults that aren't regulated, their stress response system is very inconsistent, and the code book that they're developing for balance and safety and regulation is not being developed. So that's why we always make sure we are regulated and pass our regulation to the students. This connectedness or attunement has the power to counterbalance any adversity that the child might have experienced before they came into your classroom, and that's why it's just so very important. So common behaviors for infants exposed to trauma, they do outline these more in the book, but if they have the fight, flight, or freeze responses, this is how you might see it. So in fight, for an infant, you might see them difficult to soothe and consolable crying. In flight, you might have some feeding challenges or resist food and sleep. Or in the freeze, you might find disruption in vocalization, limited interest in playing, social withdrawal. So that would be for infants. We have toddlers, again, divided up into fight, flight, and freeze. Here are some of the behaviors that you might see there. And then we get to your age, or preschool age, in our Head Start classrooms. So the fight, flight, or freeze, again with the fight, you might see behavior that alternates from one extreme to another. hits self or hits others, the biting, the kicking. With the flight, you might see how the students run away, or they hide, they cover their face, or they refuse to listen to adults. And then with freeze, just the lack of play, the withdrawal, the delay in language, and sometimes you can see hiding as well there. So giving a child a voice, this is what we're doing. We're moving from the mindset of what is wrong with you to asking our students what has happened to you. From that, we ask, what is their behavior communicating to me? The reason that this is so important is because we're kind of switching the narrative. We're not saying that there's anything wrong with the child. We're trying to figure out what they have been through, what has happened to them, because then it explains some of the behaviors that we're seeing, and then we'll try to figure out what is that behavior trying to tell me. What I will say is that trauma from age birth to 2 has a much deeper impact than if the child was older. If a child in the first 2 months of life experienced high adversity with minimal buffering relationships, so minimal number of people in their life that are protective factors, but then was put into a healthy environment for the next 12 years, their outcome was worse than that of the outcome of a child who had a low adversity in health relationships for the first 2 months of life, but then spent the next 12 years in high adversity. So what they're saying is that from birth to age 2 has a deeper impact on the child as they get older than experiencing trauma or adversity in their time in their life. And that's why it's so important that we understand what has happened to the children that come into our school, so that we can better understand what their behavior is trying to communicate to us. And finally, I want to end with this amazing video that I absolutely love. And if you have not seen any of her videos, you really should look them up on YouTube, because I think she's absolutely amazing and she's so inspiring. And so I will start this one here.
Hello there, Nefertiti Pointer here with the DevRose Center for Resilient Children. How are you? So before we get too far, I want you to go get all your colleagues. Go get everybody. Go get everybody. This video is for everybody, so go get them. Okay, why are you still looking at me? I asked you to go get your colleagues. I'm just joking. Kinda, no, really, I'm serious. But if you don't have everybody with you, then sometime later, can you make sure that everybody gets together and can listen to this message? Because this one is one that I want to make sure everybody hears. All right? So some of my most important work started when I started teaching CDA. I loved being a CDA instructor. Loved it. My classroom sizes were usually small. We were able to take our time and unfold the content. It was just great. And one year I had this amazing young adult who just was getting so excited about the knowledge base around what happens in the lives of babies, toddlers, and preschoolers. It was wonderful. And one Monday she came to class. She was telling me about being in the emergency room. No, she couldn't come to class on Friday because she had to take her son to the doctor. And she told me at the doctor's office she met a teacher. She was so excited. But this is when the conversation gets interesting. This woman she met teaches 4th grade. And she knew this because she was talking. The teacher was marking papers. The teacher was marking papers. But when this person asked my CDA student what she did for a living, she did not feel comfortable telling her she was a teacher. She said, Miss Nefertiti, she teaches 4th grade. She was grading papers. When she asked me what I did for a living, it didn't feel good to say I was a teacher because I just teach preschool, 2-year-olds. So needless to say, I don't think we got much CDA work done that day because we had to have a heart-to-heart. And I took the I asked her if it was okay if I could take our conversation and bring it to the bigger classroom, and she said yes. And so we took the rest of the afternoon to talk about who we were as individuals, what our efforts to further our education in CDA and what that meant and what we were going to do past CDA. And we talked about the fact that we were nobody's babysitter. Somebody listening to me today, you have not yet fully understood how valuable you are. It took COVID-19 for people to start to call us essential, but let me tell you this. We knew we were essential before. The world is now just catching up. Because I don't want to take much more time of your valuable time today, I want to say this, and then I'm going to say see you later. You are a teacher. You are a teacher. You teach at fill in the blank Head Start. You teach at fill in the blank preschool program. You teach at fill in the blank. And those of us who are doing other things beyond teaching, we could not manage our programs without you. Whether you're the cook, whether you help us keep our place clean, whether you are the bus driver, we all have a place in this programming we call early care and education. And I don't want you to ever forget that. And the next time someone asks you what you do for a living, I would like to suggest that you tell them that you are a protective factor. You are a protective factor, because a protective factor is a person, place, thing, situation that helps buffer someone from everyday life difficulty. Now you say, well, Nefertiti, is that really what I do? Well, you just keep going on and you'll find that there may be some difficulty in the life of the babies, toddlers, and preschoolers that you teach. And good teachers are good protective factors. Good directors are good protective factors. Happy bus drivers are protective factors. Team members who prepare our food in a way that not only evokes health for the body, it evokes health for the spirit. You are a protective factor. And to every other job title that I forgot today, when someone asks you what you do for this program, you tell them you are a protective factor. That's my message today, and that's why I wanted everybody to hear it. You matter. You matter. And again, when someone says, well, what do you do with the program? You tell them you're a protective factor. I'll see you soon. Thanks for listening.
I just love that so much. So I just want to make sure that you know that you are a protective factor. You matter. You are important. And without you, we wouldn't have a program, and all of these children would not have you in their life. So thank you for everything that you do.